Breaking tonight, a dramatic confrontation in Parliament has left Westminster stunned. Nigel Farage delivered a withering challenge to Prime Minister Keir Starmer that has shaken the Labour leadership to its core. One question, precise and devastating, triggered uproar across the Commons, with half the Labour benches walking out in protest. What followed was 12 seconds of complete silence, a rare moment in British politics, as Farage unveiled evidence that could ignite a constitutional crisis and possibly push the country toward an early general election. Here's how it unfolded. At exactly 2:43 p.m. during Prime Minister's questions, Nigel Farage rose from his seat, calm, deliberate, a manila folder in hand. His tone was measured, his words restrained. Prime Minister, the British people deserve answers about immigration policy that affects every community in this nation. But the reaction from Keir Starmer told another story. A smirk, a dismissive glance, a man seemingly confident that he could brush it aside. That confidence would not last long. Farage didn't raise his voice. Instead, he raised that folder, and within 90 seconds, the entire mood of the chamber shifted. His statement was simple, factual, and devastating. Mr. Speaker, I hold in my hand leaked Home Office documents dated January 15, 2025, showing this government-approved temporary housing for illegal channel crossers at a cost of $127 per person, per night. He paused. Meanwhile, British military veterans sleeping rough receive precisely $0 in emergency accommodation. The impact was immediate. The chamber erupted, Labour MPs shouting denials, Conservatives cheering, the Speaker calling repeatedly for order. But Farage pressed on. The Prime Minister claims he has no knowledge of these figures, so either he's lying or he's so out of touch that his own Home Office operates without his awareness. Which is it, Prime Minister? At that moment, the atmosphere in Westminster turned electric. Witnesses described Starmer's expression as pale and shaken. His eventual response, halting and defensive, did little to restore confidence. The honourable member distorts facts as usual, he stammered. Few were convinced. Even members on his own benches avoided eye contact. Political journalists described the exchange as one of the most volatile scenes in Parliament in modern memory. The Speaker had to intervene 3 separate times to calm the uproar. What made this confrontation even more striking was its timing. Only 20 minutes earlier, Starmer had been confidently touting Labour's economic achievements, even mocking the opposition's inexperience. The contrast between that earlier bravado and his collapse under Farage's scrutiny was staggering. Veteran observers were quick to react. Sky News political editor Beth Rigby tweeted, "I've covered Westminster for 20 years. Never seen a Prime Minister undone so completely in real time." The BBC's Laura Kensberg described Starmer's demeanour as a man who realizes he's been caught out. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere, leading every major bulletin, dominating social media feeds, and sparking heated debate across the country. This wasn't just a political clash. It was a moment that could redefine the balance of power in British politics. And as Westminster braces for the fallout, one thing is certain. The next 72 hours will be critical for the Prime Minister, his party, and the direction of the United Kingdom itself. Across Britain tonight, former servicemen and women, individuals who once risked their lives in Iraq and Afghanistan, are sleeping rough on the streets they once defended. In Manchester and Birmingham, beneath cold bridges and railway arches, their stories are becoming a national disgrace. One of them is David Morrison, a 58-year-old former Royal Marine who completed 3 tours in Helmand Province. Last Tuesday morning, he was found outside Victoria Station suffering from hypothermia. 14 times he applied for council housing, and 14 times he was rejected. When paramedics arrived, his service medals were beside him in a carrier bag. His only offense, it seems, was being British. Meanwhile, those who entered the country illegally just weeks ago are being housed in heated hotels, receiving 3 meals a day, Wi-Fi, and round-the-clock security in seaside accommodations many working families could never afford. The contrast is stark, and for many, morally indefensible. Even lifelong Labour voters are voicing their outrage. And David Morrison's case is far from unique. Sarah Jenkins, a 52-year-old former Army nurse who served in Bosnia, has been living in her car in Cardiff for 7 months. She was told the waiting list for veterans housing is now 18 months long. Her daughter shared her story on social media. A simple 30-second clip, viewed more than 4.7 million times in just 2 days. The comments turned into a digital wall of testimony, as dozens of veterans described their own battles with bureaucracy and neglect. One former paratrooper wrote, "I jumped into Helmand. Now I can't jump the queue for a council flat." These are not statistics. These are the men and women who wore the uniform, served under the flag, and returned home to a nation that, increasingly, seems to have forgotten them. This morning's polling underscores the depth of that sentiment. 81% of working-class Britons now believe the government has betrayed its own people, including lifelong Labour supporters who have voted red for generations. In the Labour heartlands of Sunderland and County Durham, voters who once saw the party as their voice are openly discussing a shift to Reform UK. One 63-year-old retired miner told researchers, "My grandfather fought at Normandy. He'd be disgusted by what Labour's become." But what happened next was truly extraordinary. In an unprecedented moment, King Charles broke with 7 decades of royal restraint. Speaking at a Commonwealth reception yesterday evening, His Majesty declared, "In serving our nation, we must never forget those who served us first." Palace insiders later confirmed that the phrase was personally inserted by the king himself, reportedly over the objections of senior advisors. The implications are extraordinary. For a reigning monarch to deliver even a veiled rebuke of government policy is virtually without precedent. It signals that the crisis has reached such magnitude that even the palace could no longer remain silent. According to senior sources, emergency discussions took place inside Buckingham Palace throughout Tuesday night. The King's private secretary is said to have warned the Prime Minister's office that public patience has limits. As one insider quietly told The Times, "His Majesty is deeply concerned." In diplomatic language, that statement carries weight. In political terms, it's a warning. Fix this, or face consequences no modern prime minister has ever had to confront. There's a deeper layer to this royal intervention that makes it even more consequential. According to senior palace sources, it was the Prince of Wales who personally briefed the king on the escalating crisis of veteran homelessness ahead of the Commonwealth reception. For years, Prince William has championed military and mental health causes through his foundation's work. He reportedly told his father that continued royal silence on this issue could permanently damage the monarchy's relationship with the armed forces. That alone is extraordinary, the future king urging the monarch to act. And Charles listened. Constitutional scholars now describe this as the most direct act of royal political engagement since the abdication crisis of 1936. Professor Michael Henderson of Cambridge told The Telegraph, "The monarchy survives by staying invisible in politics. What we witnessed yesterday was the king making himself visible, and that means the situation has become existential." Some historians argue that Charles may have just preserved the monarchy's moral authority by standing with ordinary Britons. Others warn that he's risked the institution itself by appearing to take sides. Either way, the stakes could not be higher. The first shockwaves were felt in the financial markets. Sterling fell 1.3% against the dollar within hours of Nigel Farage's confrontation in Parliament. The FTSE 100 shed $14 billion in value before trading closed. Investors are now openly questioning Britain's political stability. One senior trader at Barclays told the Financial Times, "Nobody knows what Britain stands for anymore. That uncertainty is toxic for investment." And as markets reacted, the Labour Party began to fracture in plain sight. 7 Labour MPs issued a joint statement demanding the Prime Minister immediately address the growing disparity in immigration costs. A rare act of open defiance. Party insiders suggest as many as 30 more MPs are privately furious but holding their fire, at least for now. Former Labour Minister John Speller, a veteran of 40 years in Westminster, gave a blunt assessment on live television. "This government has lost its moral compass. We're supposed to represent working people. Right now, we represent chaos." International reaction was swift and harsh. Poland's conservative government praised Farage's moral clarity. Italy's Giorgia Meloni retweeted footage of his speech with 3 fire emojis. Even moderate French politicians admitted Britain's immigration policy now looks unsustainable. Social media exploded. The hashtag #DichingFaragev-Starmer trended globally for 18 consecutive hours. The clip of Starmer's faltering response drew more than 12 million views on TikTok, galvanizing a younger generation that had largely tuned out of Westminster politics until now. Protests soon followed. In Newcastle, veterans groups marched to Labour Party headquarters demanding answers. Similar demonstrations erupted in Birmingham. These weren't organized activists. They were ordinary Britons who simply felt betrayed. Inside Number 10, the mood has reportedly turned chaotic. One source described it as a disaster command center after the missiles already hit. Ministers are openly clashing. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper is said to have shouted at Cabinet Secretary Simon Case, demanding to know who leaked the accommodation cost documents. Case allegedly replied that perhaps the focus should be on the policy itself, not the leak, a response that perfectly captures the government's internal disarray. Chancellor Rachel Reeves, overheard leaving the meeting, reportedly told an aide, "We're governing like amateurs, and the public knows it." Meanwhile, WhatsApp groups titled Labor Reset and New Direction have appeared, backbench networks plotting Starmer's removal. The question inside Westminster is no longer if they'll move against him. It's when. Those who were in the room say Starmer appeared visibly shaken during yesterday's cabinet meeting. For 20 minutes, he barely spoke, staring down at briefing papers while colleagues argued around him. One minister described him as a broken man watching his premiership disintegrate. Another said more bluntly, he's finished, and he knows it. What's striking is who hasn't come to his defense. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner has remained completely silent, not a single word in Parliament, on television, or on social media. It's a silence that speaks volumes. Insiders say Rayner has been meeting backbench MPs privately, positioning herself as the unity candidate who could stabilize the party once Starmer falls. One MP who met her described the conversation as essentially a job interview for Prime Minister. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves, meanwhile, is moving just as carefully, projecting herself as the serious, capable alternative, while others descend into panic. Both women see the same opportunity. Both are preparing for the same vacancy. But beneath the political maneuvering lies a revelation that could turn this crisis into a full-blown constitutional emergency. Leaked Home Office emails obtained by Reform UK allegedly show that civil servants warned ministers, 8 months ago, that the cost disparity in accommodation would spark a public backlash. Those warnings were ignored. If the emails are authentic, they suggest the Prime Minister knew of the problem and chose not to disclose it to Parliament. If true, that's not just political damage, it's potential misconduct. The Prime Minister has repeatedly stood at the dispatch box insisting he was unaware of the figures. If his own department briefed him on them, that's deliberate deception of Parliament, a breach that traditionally ends careers. Legal experts are already debating whether this could constitute contempt of Parliament, a charge that can trigger removal even without a leadership vote. Professor Vernon Bogdanor has called the situation unprecedented in peacetime British politics. If Keir Starmer knowingly misled Parliament, he isn't just facing political defeat, he could face criminal investigation. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage is seizing the moment with clinical precision. His post-question session statement was succinct, strategic, and delivered with the authority of a man sensing momentum. This isn't left versus right anymore. This is Britain versus betrayal. The message resonates. The latest polling shows Reform UK surging from 18 to 31% in just 72 hours. Labour has collapsed to 23%, while the Conservatives hold at 28%, losing traditional Tory voters to Farage's movement. For the first time, Reform UK leads as the largest single political force in Britain. Betting markets now place Farage's party at 45% odds of winning the most seats in the next general election, up from just 8% 3 weeks ago. It's a political realignment unfolding in real time. The next 48 hours could determine everything. Parliament reconvenes Monday morning. If as few as 30 Labour MPs rebel, the government falls. The King would then face a historic decision: call a snap election or invite opposition parties to form a coalition. Britain hasn't faced political uncertainty this severe since 1974. Historians will study this as the moment the old order began to collapse, when the two-party dominance broke, when the working class walked away from Labour, and when control of the political narrative slipped from the establishment's hands. At the center of it all stands Keir Starmer, isolated, diminished, and politically cornered. Nigel Farage, by contrast, now looks and sounds like a prime minister in waiting. The reversal is staggering, and whether you support him or not, it's impossible to deny. British politics has just changed forever.